Welcome to reading class today. If you didn't join us for the online class today, that's perfectly okay, and so that's why this video is still there. But if you did already do reading class with us online, you can actually skip this video and skip the assignment today because we did those together. But for those who chose to do reading at a different time, let's talk through the vocab words today, and let's talk through what happened in chapters 29, 30, 31, just to keep everybody on track. And then we'll talk about a couple other topics that I talked about online with everybody today too that chose to join us live. And that way this will be the same class that we did online, just in a recorded form for you. I do have to say I was a little disappointed yesterday when I graded the vocab words from, let's see, that would have been Wednesday, because I noticed that some people, we had probably missed more vocab words than we had in a long time. And I could tell some people forgot to look up the words. Here's what really tipped me off to that. You maybe saw my email, but the word grouse has a lot of different meanings. It can mean a bird, but and six people, you guys are gonna make my hair gray. 6 people put down a bird, but in our context of our book, that would have made no sense, right? Because it said Grayson groused about Maniac not going to school, and so it wouldn't make sense to say Grayson bird, or a type of bird, about Maniac not going to school. That makes no sense. And one of the other definitions for grouse is to grumble or complain. Now that makes more sense. Grayson grumbled or complained about Maniac never going to school, right? And so be careful. I could tell quite a few of us forgot to look up vocab words in the book when they're finding their meanings. Be faithful about that, because most English words have more than one meaning. And if you don't look them up in the context of the book, chances are you may grab a wrong meaning that doesn't fit our book, okay? So just an encouragement to do that. I was curious how many people were going to put down bird for grouse, and I had 6 people do that. So 6 people, I think, that weren't careful to look those words up. So let's do that carefully today. And then don't forget when you do your assignment to do that carefully as well. The word knack is about 3 paragraphs from the top. It said, the old man showed an early knack for consonants. Okay, that's Grayson when he's learning how to read, right? He had a knack for getting down the consonants, the non-vowel letters, right? Just like he had a knack for pitching a baseball when he was younger. A knack is just a skill, an ability. And I think of some of you other guys, like Anthony's got a knack for playing basketball. Gavin and Ryan, I think, and Anthony too, I suppose you could say for that too, have a knack for playing soccer. Caitlin has a knack for swimming. Those are all examples of some people who have a knack for something. And you all have different knacks, abilities. I just chose to list off a few people that came into my head first today. All right, 106, thronged. Join me in looking that one up. Thronged is in the second paragraph on 106. It says, but that didn't stop the old man and the boy from joining the 10,000 who thronged to the stadium on the boulevard to see the high school football game. So thronged just means gathered together. Gathered or collected together. And so obviously like a crowd would throng at a game, to thronged, gathered, or collected together. Meandering, 113. Meandering, very first line on 113. You actually have to go to the bottom of 112. It says, they walked the creek woods all the way to the zoo, meandering wordlessly through the snowy enchantment. So you could walk straight to a store, or you could meander there, right? When they're out and just exploring the beautiful nature with all the snow, they chose to meander. Meandering means to go on a winding course. So I'll just put winding, or you could say curving, okay, or turning all the time. Yeah, not going in a straight line would be a good one too. Not going straight. Those would all be good definitions for meandering. You know, if you're in a hurry, you're not going to meander, but if you're just exploring nature, you're going to go all over the place and curving directions and wind all over because you're exploring. And that's what Maniac and Grayson were doing at that point in the book. So let's talk about what's going on. What made the ending of the football game so exciting for Maniac? So he and Grayson went to the big football game, right? And this was on the, and they saw hands down catch the winning touchdown pass. I'm just going back to it now to make sure I'm saying that correct. Yep, it was a 73-yard last-minute touchdown pass to James Hands Down, and that was really, really cool and exciting for Maniac because Hands Down's one of his buddies that he's played football with before. Number 2, what made this Thanksgiving better for Maniac than any other Thanksgivings he had ever been to? he went back and had a little Thanksgiving meal with Grayson. They made all kinds of crazy food and SpaghettiOs and everything, crimpets, right, applesauce, and I love Maniac's prayer. It's hilarious to me. Dear God, we want to take this opportunity to thank you for the best Thanksgiving dinner we've ever had. I've ever had. I guess I shouldn't speak for my friend Grayson. And he goes, Grayson, is this your favorite one too? The old man opened one eye. He shrugged and said, don't know, ain't tasted it yet. Maniac glared, rolling his eyes toward him, and hissed, Grayson? The old man flinched. Yeah, I guess it is. So that just makes me crack up that in the middle of the prayer, he whispers to Grayson and asks him if it's the best one he's ever had too. But it's the best because Maniac finally feels like he has a little family, he and Grayson, and it's special to him to have that Thanksgiving together. What did Maniac Magee want paint for? Maniac wanted a house number on his bandshell storage room house, right? And so he got some black paint and he painted 101 Bandshell Boulevard, right, over the doorway of his little house. And that was something he was so proud of, right? What did Grayson officially decide to do at the beginning of the chapter? He officially decided to move in with Maniac Magee. He moved out of the YMCA that he had been living in, and now he was going to live in the Bandshell storage room too. Since Grayson and Maniac were so full of Christmas spirit, what did they head outside to do? They headed outside to find a tree to cut down and bring in, right? And then they decorated it and made it all nice for Christmas in their little house, right? And then on Christmas Day, who did Maniac and Grayson bring a special gift to? What was the gift? That made me kind of crack up too. He brought it to the baby buffalo, right? He made the baby buffalo like a little scarf, or actually a big scarf, a whole bunch of scarves tied together to go around a big buffalo. What gift did Maniac Magee make for Grayson? And as a parent, I can tell you that the best gifts you get from your kids are the ones that are handmade. You know, they could buy you something from the store, but they're never as special as the cards you get from your kids telling you that they love you and stuff like that. And I know Maniac's not Grayson's real child, but it's almost like they're an adopted family, right? And he made a book about Grayson striking out Willie Mays, that famous baseball player, which was a true story, by the way. Grayson really did strike him out, and he drew him a book and designed it, and Grayson could read it now with his new reading skills. Kind of a touching gift, right? And then Grayson had a special gift for Maniac in number 8. He gave him his old baseball glove that he used to pitch in the minors with, and that he struck out the Hall of Famer with. And even though it looked beat up, and the book even said it looked like it could go in a trash can, to Maniac that was a really special gift because Maniac loves baseball. And here's a glove that an actual minor leaguer used, and that was really cool to him. What shocking news does the chapter end with? I don't blame you if you couldn't stop reading, because the chapter literally ends with, 5 days later, the old man was dead. Talk about a cliffhanger, right? They just leave you hanging there like, oh my goodness, what happened, right? And if you read on, you found out what happened. If you didn't, that's okay too. We'll read on today and find out what happened with that. But yeah, he was dead. And so little did Maniac know that that was one of the last memories he'd have with Grayson. Poor Maniac, right? Every time he thinks he gets a family and he's so proud of where he lives, so far something bad has happened, right? We had those bad situations that happened with the Beals. Not between him and the Beals, but the fact that people hated him in that side of the city made him have to run away. And now Grayson, he finally finds a home he likes again and someone who accepts him for who he is. And now Grayson dies. And so you can kind of feel for Maniac what a rough life he's had so far. On top of that, losing his parents and losing his original home too. So he's Maniac really 3 times in this book has lost his family and lost his home. That's got to be really, really rough. So one of the things we'll talk about, or we did talk about in the live class, that I want to talk about with you on the recorded class too, is what causes racism. This book talks a lot about racism, a hating of other people just because of their race or their skin color. Our country's gotten better with that. One of the evidences of that is we elected a black president recently with President Obama, right? But racism is still a huge problem in our country. In fact, right now in the news, if you've been watching the news, a black man who was running from the police was shot. Now, normally police only shoot at people who have guns and weapons and threaten them. But it is a true fact that more black people do end up getting shot by the police than white people do. And certainly in some cases, maybe the black person threatened the officer, and that's what caused that. But at the same time, I think there is this fear, even among police officers sometimes, of people of different races. And that shouldn't surprise us because of sin. And that's a big controversy in the news right now, that this person was shot and he didn't even have a weapon. And studies have shown that just being black makes you more likely to get pulled over or shot by the police and things like that. And that's true. That does unfortunately happen. Now, most of our police officers, or the majority of them, are white people because we live in a country that is still a majority of white people. Right? But even if we say that we don't have any racist thoughts at all, because of the sin in our hearts, we all struggle with this from time to time. And so let's talk about what causes people to hate or dislike people of other races. Here's a few. Notice this is a really familiar word to us. Stereotypes, right? These wrong ideas about or assumptions about people of different cultures that often turn out to be true. For instance, that black people aren't as smart as white people. That's a really negative stereotype. That's not true at all. And yet I still think there are probably people in our world that still believe that. Now that comes all the way back from when slavery used to exist. That you used to find things like that actually in science books. It's sad, but that used to be in science books, hundreds of years ago when slavery was around. And people actually believe that. And some of those ideas still exist today, very sadly. And so it's just people believing false stereotypes of people. Or another stereotype we've talked about is that, black people commit crimes more often than white people. Or if I ask you to picture a criminal, chances are maybe you picture someone of a different skin color from you. That's natural. Because we're sinful, we tend to have distrust for people of other cultures and wrong ideas about them that are not true. And that's something that can cause us to have bad feelings about people of different races, even without ever meeting them. So that's one cause of racism. Here's another one. Xenophobia is a fancy word for having just a general dislike for people of other cultures. And in America, sometimes I think we think our American white culture, because many people in our country are white, is the best. And we have the best nation and the strongest nation. It sometimes can cause us to think negatively about people from other cultures and maybe even look down on them and maybe even be a little racist towards other cultures, right? Think of like the Mexican culture and how often people speak poorly of the Mexican culture in our country. Oh, we need to build a wall and keep them out, and oh, they don't belong here, and they're all illegal. And you hear people say stuff like that in many cases is not true. Many of them are here very legally. But that would be an example of xenophobia. Here's another one. Ignorance. And I would put Grayson in this category. Ignorance means not knowing something you really should, or just not knowing something, or thinking something is true that's not really true. That's ignorance and fear of global cultures. Remember Grayson asking questions like, Maniac, did the black people use toothbrushes? Maniac, did they have furniture in their house? And Grayson just doesn't know. He's never lived with a black person before. He lives in a town that's very separated. He probably never went to school with black people or had any black friends. So he just doesn't know. And so that kind of, when things that are unknown kind of make you afraid. If you find like a lump on your body, that can make you kind of afraid. Oh no, is that cancer? Or, is it just an injury? And just that unknown makes you feel uncomfortable, right? Same with races. If you don't know much about a race, you might feel uncomfortable around them and maybe even treat them poorly because you're afraid of them, right? And that happens, I think, with Muslims in our country a lot, and those Somalians in our own city. I think some people are afraid of them just because they don't understand them, or they have this wrong idea in their head that all Muslims are terrorists, when that's not anywhere near the truth at all. There are Muslim terrorists, but very, very, very few Muslims would ever hurt someone in a terrorist attack, right? In fact, the vast majority of them would never do that. Now, it is not a true religion, but at the same time, not all Muslims are terrorists. In fact, very few of them are. There are Christian terrorists, too. Did you know that? Christian people who have blown up abortion clinics and things. Now, certainly abortion, killing babies before they're born, is a sin in God's eyes, but that's not the way God wants Christians to solve that problem, right? To hurt or kill or wreck buildings of other people, right? And so this ignorance, this idea like people have in their heads that, Muslims are scary because they're terrorists, can cause them to act racist towards people of other cultures. Poverty and unemployment can cause people to have bad ideas about other races. Like, for instance, racism doesn't just go from white people to black people, but it can go from black people to white people too. If there's some people who are poor, maybe they, in general, because African Americans have been held down in the past, and some inner cities don't have good schools, it can sometimes be challenging for some of the African Americans who live in inner cities to get a good education and a good job. Okay, that is a true sad thing that still happens in our world today. And because they're poor, they might start to hate white people who they think have life easier. And that would be a stereotype too, that white people have an easier life. Now, in some cases, that might be true. It's hard to be a minority, but that doesn't mean every white person has an easy life or a good job or a good school to go to. But you can see how that might cause anger from a person who's maybe a black person for someone who's white, because they think all white people are rich or snobby or stuck up. And certainly that's a stereotype. That's not true. But you can see how that could cause feelings like that. And here's a big one. Racism is often passed down in families. Ever since slavery, if you hear your parents talk poorly of African Americans, or if your parents years and years and years ago, in the old times owned slaves, you probably didn't think very highly of African Americans either. And my dad, whose dad was a Christian man, struggled with that too. And I would say that's probably pretty common. Your great-great-grandparents, maybe, or your great-grandparents probably grew up in a time where there was still quite a bit of racism in our country. And my dad would even say that his dad sometimes would say things like, oh, I don't trust that person, he's a black person. And my dad even had to remind his dad that that's not an okay way to think, but that was just something that was more common, and it was passed down. And if your parents are, act racist or show a distrust for other people or say things like, oh, those Somalians can't be trusted, well, then the kids probably will start having those feelings too. So those are all causes of what can cause racism and can lead to bad thoughts. Now, as Christians, racism we see as this. It's a sin. In God's eyes, he loves all people, and he wants us to avoid racism. And so I want you to know that it's always a sin, but it's good to know what causes that so we can watch out in our own lives to avoid that. So that's going to be our code word for today, racism. Something I want you to be thinking about because it is a sin, and I want you to be looking at your own life and avoiding these things that can cause you to have sinful thoughts about people from other cultures. All right, let's read our section for today. Watch how Maniac Magee in this book, I think he does an awesome job of it, continues to fight against racism with just the way he treats other cultures kindly. Here we go. 115, chapter 32. Most mornings, Grayson would be the first one out of bed. Here's explaining a little more of how he died, right? He would turn on the space heater, visit the bandshell lavatory, bathroom, then heat up some water, get breakfast ready, and finally wake the boy with a gentle shake of the shoulder. On December 30th, it was the silence that woke Maniac and the cold. The space heater wasn't on. No steaming cups sat on the table. The old man was still under the covers. Maniac went over. Grayson! He shook the old man. Grayson? He took the old man's hand. It was cold. Grayson! He didn't run to the superintendent's office. He didn't run to the nearest house. He knew. He held the cold, limped hand that had thrown the pitch, that had struck out Willie Mays, that had betrayed the old man's stoic ways by giving him top of 116, by giving him a squeeze. He began talking to the old man about places he had been on the road, about places the two of them might have gone to, about everything. Then he began to read aloud. He read aloud all the books the old man had learned to read, and he finished with the old man's favorite, Mike Mulligan's Steam Shovel. When he looked out the window, it was night. He dragged his chest protectors alongside the old man's mat and lay down, and only then, when he closed his eyes, did he cry. The funeral, such as it was, took place on the third day of the new year. Maniac had last gone to tell someone, the zookeeper, and from then on he pretty much stayed out of the way. Grayson came to the cemetery in a wooden box. The pallbearers, those are the people who carry the casket he's in, were unknown to Maniac. They were members of the town's trash collecting corps, and as they huffed and bent to lay the box over the hole, they smelled vaguely of pine and rotten fruit. So, sad part of the story, right? Grayson didn't really have a lot of people that cared about him other than Maniac, and so they couldn't find anybody to carry his casket or really even come to his funeral, so they just invited the garbage crew to carry it. Kind of a sad part of the story, right? Maniac was the only mourner. He had thought that the Parkins superintendent, his boss, right, might show, or the attendant at the Y locker room, or maybe the lady who ran the park food stand in the summer. None of them was there. Only Maniac and the man from the funeral home and the 6 pallbearers and 2 men off to the side smoking cigarettes and leaning on a little hole-digging tractor that made Maniac think of something. He smiled inwardly. Hey, Grayson, look. Mike Mulligan's steam shovel had a baby. So in his head, he pretends to talk to Grayson, right? High above, a silver plane crossed the sky, silent as a spider. A voice startled Maniac. When's he coming? It was one of the pallbearers. The man from the funeral home pushed down the top of his black leather glove to expose his watch. Should be here now. Should have been here 5 minutes ago. Well, how long are we going to wait? The funeral man shrugged. All but one of the pallbearers lit up cigarettes. Maniac wished he hadn't come. This event had nothing to do with the man who once lived in the body in the wooden box. I'm freezing my kachangas off, a pallbearer announced. Me too, said another. Hey, called one of the gravediggers, we ain't waiting all day to fill in that hole. Everyone looked to the man in the long black coat. He looked again at his watch. Traffic probably, so notice they're waiting for like a pastor or someone to come and say a few words, right? But he's late. The minister, thought Maniac, that's who we're waiting for. A pallbearer walked over to the funeral man. We hauled the stiff here, ain't that enough? They only give us an hour. Another pallbearer chimed in. Let's go get some donuts. Hot coffee, baby. Loud clanks. A gravedigger was striking the baby's steam shovel with a spade. The funeral man sighed. He pulled out his own cigarette and lit it from the glowing tip of the pallbearers. Give it 2 more minutes, then we'll see. Maniac waited for one of those minutes, searching the horizon for signs of a minister. Whatever was going to happen at the end of the next minute, he didn't want to see it, so he ran. "Hey, kid," they called. "Yo, kid!" But he was running. So kind of a sad funeral, right? Not even the pastor showed up to bury him, and when Maniac realized they were probably going to end up burying him even without a funeral, it just made him so sad he had to run away. So kind of a sad little section of the book. So you'll get to find out what happens next. You'll see Maniac really struggle with, like depression and sadness as he deals with the loss of his friend. So kind of a sad part of the book, but enjoy as we kind of get close to wrapping up the book here.